Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak today. My name is Shirley Rodrigues. I'm Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, working for Mayor Sadiq Khan of London, who was elected 6 months ago. I've been in post just for 6 weeks, but there's been an awful lot of activity before I got there, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of a flavour of Sadiq's vision for London. So first of all, a bit of context. London's population is growing fast. We're currently about 8.6 million people, and we're forecast to grow to about 11.3 million. And you'll see from this graph here that we are regaining the peak peak of population in London that we had just before the Second World War in the 1930s and 40s. The rate of population growth is very fast. And in London it's been twice as much as the rest of the UK. And some commentators have talked about the impact on the economy that has, and that really we should be trying to rebalance the economy away from London out to other parts of the UK, which we do accept. But even if that were to happen, because of that rate of growth, it means that the infrastructure needed in London is massive, and the estimates that we have made are roughly around £1.3 trillion. And that population growth brings a number of challenges. As we know, housing supply, housing affordability, pressure on infrastructure, and then environmental challenges like poor air quality, lack of urban green space, and so on. And the Mayor has just published a document called A City for All Londoners, which sets out his vision for how we might tackle those challenges. And this is out for consultation at the moment. And the responses will then be gathered and be used to develop the London Plan, which is the Mayor's spatial development plan for London, reaching out to about 2040. And part of the challenges that we're looking at are the economic uncertainties that we're facing post-Brexit, and now with the US election, the sort of turmoil that we're all facing. How do cities then manage their growth, grow sustainably, but enable what Sadiq calls good growth, which is helping to lift Londoners out of poverty, reduce income disparity, and so on. So one of the key priorities that the Mayor has identified is tackling London's poor air quality. It's obviously not as bad as that in Delhi or in Beijing, but it's not great. We have something like up to the equivalent of 10,000 deaths annually brought forward because of poor air quality. You may have seen, we've launched a number of proposals to tackle air quality. We are proposing to bring forward the low emission zone, ultra low emission zone proposals and expand its coverage to across London for heavy vehicles and across inner London for cars. And we're also proposing to introduce next year what we call a toxicity charge, which is an additional charge for very polluting cars. So if you're driving into central London and you have to pay the congestion charge, you would have to pay another £10 on top. As Kevin mentioned, we're trying to clean up our own bus fleet. We're retrofitting our dirty buses with cleaner technology. And Sadiq has stated that we will not procure any more buses unless they're clean from 2018. So we should have a very clean fleet from 2018 onwards. But that's obviously not the only source of poor air quality emissions. We're also looking to tackle our non-transport emissions by lobbying the government for additional powers. The second pledge that Sadiq has made on the environmental side is that London would be a zero-carbon city by 2050, which mirrors essentially the Paris pledge to bring our temperature rise down well below 2 degrees C. And that means that we need to take a systems-wide approach to how we deal with our energy supply and our demand, both in transport, buildings, heat and power. So what we're looking at is how do we boost how we produce our energy more cleanly, looking at expanding what we're doing on solar. So we're developing a solar action plan. We're looking at how we might roll out solar panels more on our own buildings, so Transport for London buildings. And we're looking to expand some considerable work we've done in accelerating the take-up of decentralised energy. Not quite to the scale that we heard about, sort of a ski slope in London, but certainly looking at sort of heat networks and so on. We're also looking to establish a not-for-profit energy company in London. So there are a couple of cities in the UK that have started to do this, to challenge the power base that the big six energy companies have. And the aim is that we then start to take control of how we produce more clean energy and supply clean energy to Londoners, and that we can set more affordable tariffs to tackle a very big fuel poverty problem we have in London, and also deliver energy services around increasing energy efficiency to our homes. London's homes are very old, pretty poorly made, and need an awful lot of retrofitting. So just to give you a little flavour of how far that journey is, we have a very long way to go to become a zero-carbon city. Whilst London has the lowest per capita CO2 rate in the UK, we're producing 4.8 tonnes per person per annum, and that's roughly about 9 to 10% of the UK's CO2 emissions. And nearly 80% of that comes from our buildings, and half of that from our space heating. So you'll see the big challenges that we have to face in tackling that. But the efforts that we've made over the last few years are bearing fruit. We're seeing a decoupling of our emissions and growth, population growth. We've seen a 17% reduction on our CO2 emissions on 1990 levels, but that's below the trajectory we had set ourselves of around 20%. So with that ambition of being net zero carbon by 2050, we need to move at a much faster pace to implement the Paris Agreement and our own manifesto commitment. So we're developing a number of programs and reviewing the programs that we have to try and see whether we can accelerate and scale those up to manage demand down and increase the supply of green energy and other green services. As I mentioned, buildings energy efficiency is the problem. So we have problems in tackling the carbon intensity of our buildings, of our energy supply system, but also the fabric efficiency of our buildings. And we've had 3 programs that we're looking at. One is Renew, which looks at retrofitting our homes. And we've, over the past few years, retrofitted about over 100,000 homes with some very good savings and CO2 savings. We have another program called Refit, which looks at our public buildings, including the GLA's own buildings and some of our schools. And we've retrofitted over 600 of our buildings. And we've seen a very significant financial investment levered on the investment that we've put in, but also very significant CO2 savings. But, as I've said before, we need to do much more. We have a huge challenge to face there. Our current estimates are that to meet our manifesto commitment, we would have to retrofit something like 100,000 homes per year at a cost of over £1.5 billion per year, which is obviously a massive challenge. So Kevin's discussion there about green finance and how do we manage to shift the trillions that we need in London and across cities is a very big problem for us. And the other programme Kevin's already talked about, which is the Business Energy Challenge, which is we have to do much more with our businesses in London, not least because they reach much further than London. They are global companies, and as we've heard before, they have huge reach and huge opportunities to tackle CO2 savings. In terms of London's green sector, we're looking at how we might look at our supply side. We have a very strong low-carbon goods and environmental services sector worth over £30 billion in 2014-15. And it's currently dominated by around 5 sectors, as you can see there, as you'd expect in London carbon finance. But we have now a growing geothermal, wind, buildings and alternative fuels sector. But the growth rate for that sector is around 6%, which lags behind the international growth rate of about 12%. So we have plans to see how we might double that rate. And what we're trying to do is to start in two ways. One is to how do we support our small businesses? So this is one example, working with Kiwi Power on a demand response side, which is a pilot to test mobile phone apps and technology and the connection to smart meters. But the other bigger ambition we have is to create a clean tech cluster in London. So whilst we have a number of clean tech organisations working in London, they're not clustered, so we're not getting the benefits of the agglomeration that could bring. So what we're looking at is developing a cluster in West London at one of Europe's largest regeneration sites, which is Old Oak Common and Park Royal. This is an area that is going to intersect or have cutting through it High-Speed Rail 2 and Crossrail, which are major new infrastructure, transport infrastructure developments, which are due to be completed in 2026. This will make this site the most, one of the best connected sites in the UK and probably in Europe, both to Heathrow but to the rest of the UK. And we're proposing there to co-locate the cluster of businesses with one of our leading universities, Imperial, to create a clean tech accelerator, a clean tech incubator, and an early stage manufacturing centre. And the aim is to help businesses get the financial support they need, the mentoring, the low-cost office space, the business development advice, and so on, that they would need to grow good services there, both for the UK, but also to export nationally. So whilst we're here at a Danish export discussion, I think just to let you know, London's also thinking of the same thing, and no doubt lots of other C40 cities. And at the same time, we're looking at new opportunities. Kevin mentioned the circular economy. The Chinese are looking at this. And I know the team at the GLA have been talking to a number of Danish companies and organisations here, the Danish Business Authority and the Danish EPA. We estimate, we've done some research on this, that in London there are significant financial benefits of transitioning to a circular economy, something in the order of £5 billion by saving on capital infrastructure costs. Because we'd need less capital-intensive infrastructure like incineration facilities. We think tens of millions of pounds could be saved annually through improved treatment and capture of materials, through recycling, reuse and repair, remanufacturing. And of course, these all need people and businesses to help do that. So we think that would help grow London's economy by 12,000 jobs, an additional £7 billion annually by 2036. Which is amazing numbers and absolutely phenomenally needed in London. As we know now with our move to Brexit, we're having to think about how we grow our economy. The route map to the circular economy in a number of sectors is going to publish next spring. We're looking at 5 key London opportunity areas, one on the built environment, one on food, electricals and textiles. So finally, in conclusion, I hope this has given you just a little bit of a flavour of the work that we're starting to undertake in London on making it cleaner and greener and open to business. As I mentioned, the Mayor is developing a spatial development plan for London, the London Plan. But we're also revising a number of our strategies. So I'm leading the refresh of the environment strategy, which covers waste management, air quality, biodiversity, climate change, and waste, as well as our economic development strategies, our transport strategies, and so on. So the aim is to look at how we might grow London's economy. And then I think just a conversation, or just to touch on the point that Kevin made, you know, post-Brexit and now post the US election, we absolutely see non-state actors, like cities, like businesses, is absolutely critical in stepping into that potential void. We don't know what the US president-elect will do, and maybe when the realities of actually taking office hit home and getting expert advice. But whatever happens, we have to step up, not least for our own citizens. And that's what we're going to do. So thank you very much for allowing me to share a little bit of Siddique's vision, and look forward to the rest of the discussion today.
Thank you very much. Shirley Rodrigues.